Happy Friday, everyone. We are just waiting for folks to log on. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. Hope everyone is enjoying this lovely rainy Friday. Looks like we still have folks logging in, so a couple minutes. Okay, looks like we've got a good critical mass. Again, thank you for joining us for this Friday workshop with an amazingly timely topic and a wonderful group of folks that will be introducing themselves later. We want to remind everyone that we have some upcoming webinars. December 2nd, Sweat Working for a Cause, hosted by the Young Leaders. On December 4th, Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity 2020. And then on December 8th, Networking Tactics for a Virtual Business Environment. So keep a lookout for that. And also don't forget, join the conversation and please send all of your firm's news and information to share to Stephen Smith, who leads the communication social media for the chapter, and obviously retweet and send to Instagram all of the information that you'd like to share with your groups. And then, of course, thank you to our corporate partners and our Founding Circle sponsors at the platinum level, and then at the gold and silver level. Thank you. Couldn't be doing this without you guys. And we are anticipating a lot of questions. Karen will be monitoring them as the speakers are chatting back and forth, but remember to use the question and answer, not the chat, so that she'll be able to see those questions and then make sure we can answer them as part of the program. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our moderator, Karen Gill, Vice President, Workplace Experience Transformation at Fidelity, and also the Real Advantage co-chair with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean, and warm welcome to everybody, and happy that you're here with us today. John, Carol Ann, and Mark, would you turn on your video? And I'd like you to go around and introduce yourselves. We'll start with Carol Ann. And as you introduce yourself, could you just give us one word that you believe is an attribute of a hybrid work environment?
Hi, I'm Carol Ann Colbert. I am the Director of Global Workplace Strategy and Innovation at Coca-Cola. And my one word is seamless.
Very good, Carol Ann. Mark?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Mark Miller. I am a lead of practice here at Cisco in the Collaboration Technology Group, focused around hybrid working and the future of work. And I think my one attribute of hybrid working would be choice.
Very good. Thank you, Mark. And John?
Hi, I'm John Shea. I am the Director of Workplace Strategy at Johnson & Johnson. And the word I would use for the future workplace is going to be adaptable.
Okay, very good. And so we'll learn a little bit more about that as we go along. This is a conversation amongst the panel here, and thank you again for coming and joining us at Cornet. And we're going to start off with Mark with a question about what is a hybrid working environment, and could you help us understand why this is different than a flexible working or agile working environment?
Yeah, Karen, we get asked that question quite a bit. I think this is so new. I think everybody's struggling to put some boundaries around this. I think there are some unique characteristics around hybrid work versus flexible working. Flexible working we've been doing for years, right? I think the first is flexible working was largely, as much as we tried, very limited in scope. Right? What did we say? 8 to 10% of employees across the globe that were truly remote or flexible workers. I think hybrid working is going to be done at scale. And I think that's going to pose some interesting opportunities and challenges, both to IT and real estate and facility and HR leaders. I think flexible working, I think was very structured. At least I know in our place. I mean, it got to everybody was sort of grounded in the same thing. They went to the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They tend to work home Monday and Fridays or whatever their patterns were. I think hybrid is, as I said, about choice. It's about employee autonomy. And I think that creates some really interesting challenges on how we look at planning space. And not only that, how we think about some new tools that we need to put in the hands of employees to understand how they interact with the physical or built environment. I think flexible working was very location centric. I know hybrid working, as we think about it at Cisco, it's not only about where you work, but when you work and how you work. And I think now real estate and facilities people need to sort of reach across the aisle more than even they probably already have with IT, their IT peers on thinking about it much more broadly. And lastly, I think when we think about flexible working, what we seem to always come back with, it was very time oriented, or at least it seemed to be. I think it has the opportunity of truly shifting the focus of many cultures to much more results oriented culture at scale. And I think that's going to drive a lot of the HR conversations around new ways of measuring performance and employee management and development. So that's how I would characterize it.
Really interesting, Mark. And Carol Ann, I'm just wondering if you align with the choice factor in a hybrid work environment, and if you could help us understand how you're promoting a hybrid work environment at Coca-Cola, or will be.
Will be, because we're not quite there yet. We're thinking about it. No, well, remote work for us, let's start there, because I think that's what's accelerated us all into this entire conversation. And for us at Coca-Cola, it's even a little bit more complicated, because in the midst of this pandemic, we have accelerated into a significant restructuring of the company that was already planned. And so in the spirit of not letting a good pandemic go to waste, we've accelerated into that reorganization as well. And we're going from 17 business units to 9 operating companies, and they are globally distributed. So when Mark talks about this hybrid place, I think it follows the work. Work is now distributed more. And so what we saw in our working normally, but everybody just took their work home, working from home did not work for everyone for us. There were very regionally specific challenges. And then layered into that, multi-generational households and inconsistent infrastructure and government policies around responding to the pandemic. All of those variables are out there for us. So when we think about getting our heads around how hybrid work is going to work for us, we are beginning to model the levels of remote work that we think will drive how we solve for it. But it's not going to be a one size fits all for us. It's going to really be, we're pulling together sort of an enterprise-wide view of hybrid work and its success attributes where it will occur, but it's really going to be a local solution because again, in some places we will have much more presence back in the office than in other places. So it's going to be different.
Really interesting. And to that point then, John, I'm wondering if you could follow that up with some of your thoughts around governance and the issues of, bringing people back and people working from home. And what are some of those issues that you believe will center around space governance? And I think Mark even mentioned this in what he was talking about as well.
Yeah, so first, let me just reinforce one of the points that Mark made. I mean, we at J&J, we're a decade into activity-based work, which is unassigned environments in the office. And we were fairly agnostic to work from home. So work from home was a business decision. It wasn't a real estate decision. It wasn't a facilities decision. Hybrid work, we're becoming much more conscious about workforce strategy. And when we look at workforce segmentation, in the past, when we looked at who was an anchor at a site, who was maybe flexible and on-site and off-site, and who was completely remote, there was kind of a balance between the three. Maybe there were 30% anchors, 40% flexible, and another, 20 or 30% remote. When we've done segmentation on some projects, specifically in Australia, New Zealand, and Manila, that information is coming out 5%, 95%, and 0. Like everybody says now they can be hybrid because we've gone through this experience of COVID. So that segmentation may not work for us anymore. And when we look at a population that is highly hybrid in how they work, and we look at how we have to occupy and govern space, we need to be very careful with this because we expose ourselves to tremendous peaks and valleys, right? We could have a lot of people wanting to be on site at the same time. And if we're going to accommodate that, we either need to have very big facilities that are going to be very empty for long durations, or we need to do what I call coordinated collaboration. We need to understand the cadence of different groups and how they collaborate. So I work in a group that's a global group. We collaborate every 2 weeks virtually, and we collaborate face-to-face 3 to 4 times a year. That's it. We have other groups in J&J that collaborate face-to-face on a daily basis. So I think that's something we're going to need to understand, is that cadence of collaboration that different groups have, and have the mechanisms and the tools in place to balance that out over time, to sort of govern that. And I don't say with like strict fixed norms, like Tuesday is your group's day and you can only come in on a Tuesday, but Tuesday may be your standard collaboration day if you have a weekly cadence. If you have a monthly cadence, it may be the 3rd week of the month or something like that. Do you have to stay to that? No. But we'd like to sort of set some of that governance in place, some of that guideline in place, so that groups understand what their cadence can be to help us balance it out. And then if you follow up on that with how do you manage that? Co-working spaces have been doing this for years. They know how to manage various groups that have no interaction and balance out the meeting spaces that they have, the collaboration spaces that they have, the event spaces that they have. So our space is going to shift to be a higher percentage of collaborative spaces, is what most companies are saying, a lower percentage of focused workspaces. Where we're headed in our concepts is actually that some of our focused workspaces are going to become dual purpose. So multifunctional. When we design activity-based environments, every neighborhood has 2 open areas. The original intent was 1 quiet, 1 collaborative. The future intent may be 1 focus work, 1 collaborative work that could be booked as a group event space. Now, then we have to manage all that. So there are tools that, we're going to have to use to manage all this stuff. Initially, I mean, right off the bat, when COVID hit, we pushed hard into utilization technology so that we can see. Right now we're predicting, right? We're all guessing what's going to happen, and we're coming up with theories. I love working in the world of theories, but I get paid to actually make things come true. So utilization technology will actually allow us to monitor and keep track of what's happening and whether our theories are playing out the way we expected. And if not, then we have to determine, is it because we have the wrong space or because we're using it the wrong way, and we have to do more education. So there's this whole realm around how do we educate people. So those are kind of some of the parameters that we're trying to put in place to help us manage space in a world that's going to be a lot more complex than it was before.
Really interesting, John. And what we might need to do is take that complexity and make it simple. And how do we do that? So now I'm going to turn back to Mark. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about the technologies, maybe the utilization technologies, different governance technologies, but what will the role of technology play in this hybrid work environment from your point of view?
Well, obviously, Karen, it's a catalyst, but it's also an enabler. But I want to go back to one of the comments that John made, which I thought was so interesting. I wanted to do maybe a little deeper double click on it. When you talk about personas, John, they were the things that helped us rationalize our workplace 10 years ago. We, like everybody, we had 5 of them. You may have had 3, you may have 10, 20, doesn't matter, right? Reality is we used to have one called remote worker. The remote worker doesn't cover remote working now, or it doesn't cover hybrid working. You just can't do a change all remote working to hybrid working. We're starting to think about it now and realize that, you really have, if you double click into that, you have remote collaborators, you have remote communicators, you have remote concentrators. There's sort of subgroups that you really need to start to dive down deep into, because they all have now different expectations of the workplace. They all have different expectations around what technology enablement they need. And
So
getting our arms around that,
Mark, how do we make
our environment's been thrown up in the air. Humpty Dumpty's broken, right? I mean, we got to re-put them back together again. And all those models that, John, that you talked about all have to get recreated again. So I'll just pause there. I think
No,
Caroline.
you are hitting the nail on the head, because if we think about distributed work and the fact that there will be people present and there will be collaborators that are not present, how do we make that experience of collaboration equitable for the person who's not in the room, or the many people that are not in the room versus the many people who may be in the room? That is one of my real big concerns, because if we can't make that an equitable experience, and I think technology is the key, then people will drift back to place because for reasons because they feel like they are disadvantaged, and that's not a good thing.
No, you're exactly right. I think we all have looked, and if the last 8 months or whatever, it's 242 days, 4 hours and 13 minutes has shown us, whatever that is, right? The reality is, I think we all felt that one experience when we were the one remote person in a meeting and everybody else was in the room, you were forgotten about. In fact, the room typically went to lunch, and as the last person walked out the door, they said, "Hey, by the way, Mark, it's been nice talking to you." They forgot you even there. We're all very conscious of being that remote person now. And I think we're more attentive to that, and we're more attentive and engaging. You see a lot of reflective responding going on. So, Caroline, what do you think about that? We're proactively pulling people into the conversation. That's been a great thing. But the reality is, we turn the corner and we talk about hybrid work. What John said is so true. All those things we talked about utilization, all those models we've developed over the last 15 years are broken. People have choice. And how do you size a workplace? You don't know. Before coming to Cisco, I used to build contact centers for a living. Did that for 20 years. It was a random arrival of people, callers, and a random or a fixed amount of resources, agents that picked up the call. What do we have in the workplace model? A random arrival of people, employees, a fixed amount of resources, desks, space. And we've got to match that up to a service level. I could only do that when I was building contact centers with good forecasting tools and good data. That's what we kind of lack in the workplace world, that we're going to have to really ramp up quickly. And I think the development of those forecasting tools, not only for planning space, of using space, are going to be important. My closest office at Cisco, I'm based in Connecticut. I can go to Boston or New York. New York, hour 40 on the train, 20 on the subway, 10 minutes on the sidewalk, 9 floors in the elevator. If I get off that journey and I walk into that floor the first day and there's not a place for me to work, I'll give you a pass. The second time it happens, I'm not coming back because I can't trust it. And we have this unpredictability that we're going to have to manage. I think that's the exciting area that technology and policy and procedures are going to have to come together to figure out how we sort of create that service level or that branded experience. I think that's the really exciting thing, that we don't have years to fix. We got to fix it in months.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Mark's saying, but I want to go back to a point that Carol Ann made around the collaboration, and I'll highlight it with a story. So recently we had a Zoom call, and it was a team meeting, and 3 of the people were at the office, and they went into a big conference room and socially distanced, and they all jumped on the Zoom call, and they had it projected up on the screen. And when one of them spoke, it came through the speakers on their computer, the speakers on the other person's computer, the speakers on the other person's computer, and the big screen. And they were all hitting mute buttons. And in the room, they were disabled from communicating to the people that were outside of the room. So how much has the world turned? It was the exact opposite. The people in the room were crippled, and the people outside of the room were communicating freely. So then we need to look at the technology that's in those rooms, and we have our IT group right now working on that.
Yep.
Because we had rooms that were set up for a specific technology. And now we're looking at it saying, well, it needs to accommodate all these different platforms seamlessly for the person. And to the point Mark was making, the first time I use it and it doesn't work, I'll give you a pass. The second time, I'm not coming again. So we need to establish this retail mindset of the space that we manage.
Yeah, John, I think the key is, how do you make technology invisible? That's the challenge I think all technology companies, Cisco and everybody else out there, is striving for. How do you, when you walk into a space or you walk into any experience, how does technology sort of adapt to you as opposed to you having to adapt to it? And that has been the struggle. And whether you talk about the conference room or the desk or anything, right? I mean, it's all the same. But that's the strides that I think are going to really make this pivot in the right direction.
So the other technology I think is going to be really, really important is whiteboard technology, and the idea that when you gather and co-create, you guys can't see it, there's this wall of whiteboard right here. How can we make that? I think that's one of the next things that's going to be necessary to make distributed work successful. Because it's one thing if you're individual contributors, you're building whatever you're building and you're doing, and you come together to talk, but how do you come together in distributed ways to co-create visually? I think that's going to be one of the things that we're really going to be looking for here at Coca-Cola.
I think what you're talking about there is this idea that collaboration is not a single activity.
It's not a PowerPoint slide.
Look, you can collaborate to share information, to make a decision, team building, and brainstorming. And we're going to have those discrete activities in every workplace setting. And
it's going to be
that properly.
Well, we're talking, our leaders are going, and what's that going to cost, right? So
Absolutely. So you've mentioned a lot about collaboration, folks. I want to turn the focus to those focus workers that might want to come in and be together with their teams. This has been proven through research to be a way for people to share knowledge, even though they might be working alone most of the time, or possibly meet best friends, understand the culture, be a part of the world. We've talked a lot about collaboration. What are we going to do for those folks that really don't collaborate when they want to come onto campus or onto a location? How are we going to provide for them?
I'm going to quote you, Karen. You're working alone together when you were sharing your Dublin office with us. I think focus work. We have gone as a company to agile philosophy. Scrum, separate, scrum, separate, scrum, separate. So we must continue to respect that quiet, focused activity. It's not, I mean, I think we are definitely, as John said, we are really going to be distributing more space into teaming and probably more space into informal collaboration, but we can't forget that there is a purpose and a need for focus work, and especially in countries where the remote work was more challenged. I could tell you several stories across Africa where we just did not have reliable infrastructure, and people were feeling like my boss is going to think I can't do anything, but I haven't had internet for 3 days, or rolling brownouts through Johannesburg or California for that matter. But I think focus work, we're going to continue to see it in our workplaces. Might handle it differently. Yeah.
Yep. And so it leads to research on retention as well, that people can gather together even if they're not collaborating together. On that point, John, you've talked about utilization, and we do have a question from the audience around what you mean by that, what utilization tools you're using. Are you using sensors? Could you just elaborate a little bit more on what you were thinking?
Yeah, so there's lots of different technologies to monitor utilization. I think different things work for different companies at different scales. We're a fairly large company, 140,000 or so employees. I was a strong proponent of avoiding sensors as much as I could, because it would be hundreds of thousands of sensors. And when they go bad or obsolete or there are issues. And the other thing about utilization is I don't need it exact. I need it directional. We're not tracking individual people, and we don't. So what we're doing is we're actually using existing data off of our Wi-Fi network, and there are companies out there that do this, that track devices. And they can use algorithms to, buffer out the fact that you have a computer and a phone and a tablet. They can co-associate those devices and randomize and blind the data. So that's the kind of technology that we're using. It really doesn't matter which company you go to. Different companies have different benefits or difficulties. And we use a company that has different levels of that data. So for our smaller campuses, we use what we call the basic level. It tells us in 6-minute increments how many people are on site at any given time. At our larger facilities, we use advanced. And that tells us approximately where in the building are they. And so when I talk about personas, and so we have these mobility personas on-site or off-site, and then I think of department personas as far as collaboration. I want to know what their planned cadence of collaboration is. And then I want to use my utilization technology at my larger campuses to tell me, what is our cadence of collaboration? So we know which spaces are designed for collaboration and intended to be used for that collaboration and being booked for that collaboration. Now, how are they being used? And that's why the advanced technology really helps me at the larger campuses show, well, where were the people? I mean, literally, we can look at things and say, and we did this in Brazil, we noticed a certain work desk was not being used. And it was this little tiny enclosure that wrapped people, and we thought it would be really popular. And when we went and asked people, they said, well, there's no keyboard, there's no monitor in those, you just work on your laptop, so we don't like it. So we stuck the keyboard and monitor in there, and utilization went up. So having that kind of visibility to see what people are using allows you to think and react and adapt.
Really nice. Carol Ann, Mark, anything else to comment on that?
We're harvesting Wi-Fi data. That's where same echo the concern about sensors. We are looking at a suite of sensor solutions now that will be multifunction, not just for our utilization purposes. We want something that can do, and there are products out, we're looking at 3 different products right now that will, harvest, daylight harvesting, temperature control, movement, and we're also looking at asset tracking. We have a fine art, and for our major locations, we have a fair amount of fine art, and we are going to be making sure that stays put. So
I think sensors is a really interesting topic. I have a personal opinion that I think there's a definitive lifespan for that industry. I think it's going to be more likely that I think you're going to have sensing capabilities and all the other purpose-built things you build, whether it's your lighting, your collaboration endpoints, the sensors are going to be, you're going to have sensing data that you're going to need to consume. You're always going to have that environment that, I don't want to call it despairingly the legacy environment, or an existing environment where you're going to need to add purpose-built sensors to it. Yeah, obviously, but I think over the long haul, everything's going to have some sensing capability. I think the bigger challenge is how you turn that data, information insights, and insights into action. I think that's the biggest struggle, right? We're bombarded with info, data, and how do you make that, how do you rationalize or sort through that mess?
I'm wondering, Mark, with all of that mess, how much of it has to touch the actual employee versus be worked on in the background? Just from your point of view.
I think we all hope that it gets worked on in the background, right? I mean, I think we've got to insulate our employees, our stakeholders from this mess. As I said, I think technology needs to be transparent. So I think there's a lot to be there. I do want to go back to one of the comments that I think was made before about focus work or people coming into the office to work. I think that is I think that's not focused on enough. We seem to over-rotate around the only time people are going to come to the office is to collaborate. That's not the case. And that's especially important when we think about our new hires and our early in career. Think about those people. There are 3 pieces of currency: our information, building a network, and understanding reputation capital. That's what makes them valuable. That's what makes them work, right? And be effective. You only do that if you have those, not just people transient in and out to collaborate. You have to have a group of people in the office that provide that tribal knowledge to those people. So we need to not over-rotate around that. I think it's just also critical. And we know that because we bring a lot of early in career people into Cisco, right? I mean, we know that it's such a struggle, and reducing time to competency is a big measure because we're not going to have this new generation. They're not hanging around for 20 and 30 years. So if they hang around for 4, it can't take 2 years to make them productive, right? We got to get them productive in months. So if not weeks.
So on that note, all of you, what solutions do you think represents the biggest return on investment from an employee's point of view, and from the point of view of satisfaction? How can we satisfy the employee in this new hybrid solution?
I think what Mark said, make it simple. If we if it becomes complicated, if it becomes a challenge to navigate, if we have to, John's, not too many rules, but enough that I can predict. I think simplicity is just, as we figure this out, simplicity of experience is going to be very important, and in the hybrid space. And I think that bleeds into everything: how we convey culture, how we make culture digital, and so forth. It just has to be easy.
Well, I think that's a great point. You can't go fishing. You can't build an aircraft carrier if you just want to go fishing. Right? That's the analogy, right? I mean, and we tend to do that. Especially people in technology and IT, they over-engineer. I mean, we are kings of making things complicated to catch all the corner cases. So,
but I think we've talked about the fact that people now have choice, and our senior leadership is very adamant that our company is a face-to-face culture, that we want people face-to-face. The shift is that people now have the choice of when they want to be face-to-face. And that was happening pre-COVID, and COVID accelerated it anyway. I think what we have to do to make that successful, to satisfy our employees, to satisfy them, we need to get away from our traditional facilities mindset. As facility operators, if you don't start looking at your facility as a retail operation where you need to attract customers, I mean, for years at J&J, we've been talking about, well, if nobody shows up on a Friday, why don't we shut the facility on a Friday? And I turned around and I said, if that was your business, would you close on a Friday if you were selling product? No, you would reinvent Fridays with something that would attract people to come to your business on a Friday. And that to me epitomizes the difference in mindset from facilities. Well, if nobody's using it, I'll shut it down. No. If nobody's using it, you have to find out why not and come up with a reason for them to use it. So our facilities need to provide focus work in a way that is better than any other location. And it may only be better from the concept of gaining that tribal knowledge and culture of the company. That may be the attraction, but there are many other attractions you can build into that focus space. However, I do think that focus space is going to need to be spongeable and adaptable to be used in other ways. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a lot of capacity that's underutilized.
Well, that's a great point, John, because one of the things we're looking long and hard at is leaning away from fixed elements, period, and leaning on configurable space. No space will be single purpose, that will be able to, or I would say very, very little space will be devoted to single purpose, because I think we're going to build out some spaces, we're going to be repurposing some things, and we're going to be continuing to learn.
I think John's comment is spot on though, right? I mean, I have one of my colleagues that said, you know what, at the end of the day, the workplace is going to have to work a lot harder to earn the trust and respect of employees, right? It's a marketing exercise.
It's
we are selling the built environment, and we need to do that, right? I mean, with that choice, you know, we talk about that in safe return, but it extends well past vaccine and therapeutics. So.
Yeah, and I'd just like to talk a little bit about employee choice, because employee choice only goes so far, right? Like I live in Colorado. My management is in the UK in some instances, on the East Coast in some instances. I work with people in China. I have meetings at 5 a.m. Is that my choice? No, not really, but we're accommodating everybody in a department. So, you know, employee choice plays out in certain aspects of how they work, like when they may come to the office, when they may not. It doesn't always play out. Like if we have a department meeting that's an offsite meeting for 3 days, you don't just get to say, not convenient for me. You know, you have a job too. So there, you know, that balance of employee choice, it's not 100% employee choice.
I think, is it choice so much as really, you started when you were talking about structure earlier, John, I was sort of getting a negative feel, because we do believe, I mean, our pulse surveys tell us that our employees do want more opportunity for remote work. And that's interesting for us, because they're all 73% said we want to come back to the campus. This is a great campus and it's a fun place to be, and we're very much hospitality oriented, but I want choice. And so I too have 6 a.m. calls. And so that's not the kind of choice I see. I mean, you're still going to get your job, you're going to lean into your job, but you do have the choice not to attend that, you know, not to be on site to attend that 5 a.m. meeting. And so I think that's going to be the interesting thing, is how we start to monitor what does choice really mean to people. And because I would not want us to totally give up the remote opportunity that's been handed to us. I think for cities that are commute challenged or mass transit challenged, or to Mark's example of his commute one way or another, an hour and a half one way, that allowing people not to participate in a commute structure like that is a very powerful thing. So how choice emerges is going to be interesting.
My point is if your job has a requirement for face-to-face collaboration on a daily or weekly basis, that's part of the job.
Yeah,
now, you may have a choice around that, but my department, we do face-to-face 3 to 4 times a year. Those are not optional meetings. And we will shift them around to accommodate people's vacations, et cetera. But at some point, we all have to come together. So, depending on what that cadence is, different people have different flexibilities, and it's not universally, everybody has the same flexibility. It depends on your job.
Agreed.
But choice comes with this, there's degrees of choice. And I think that's where, as you say, John, I think that's where leadership has to keep in their mind what culture they're trying to drive. And, look, at Cisco, we were very virtual, almost to the point where it was too virtual that we lost in certain places sense of community. We had to bring it back. We started creating these, what we called City Hub days, where we wanted everybody to be in the office. We do a community service project. We do some training. It was an event that pulled people back together because we realized that pendulum swings both ways. Choice, I think, provides some interesting challenges, as you said, around this notion of facilities. And my kids, I have twins, they just graduated college last year. I was talking to my son about, hey, when you were in school, you used to go to the library a lot. And thankfully he got that from his mother, not from me, right? Because it wasn't anything that I ever it wasn't an inherent skill from my side. But the reality is that he, as a underclassman, he was going to the library for privacy. When he was an upperclassman, he went to the library to collaborate with peers. The reality was that library was open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our workplaces may be that way too. The expectation of an 8 to 5 workplace may be blown out the door here, right? We may think of the workplace as operating like a college library, right? It's a place where people drop in, maybe after dinner, maybe that's the right time that you want to get that focus work done. And how we set those amenities, how we set that availability. I think all those discussions all those items are up for discussion right now.
Yep.
So in thinking about all of that, and let's take technology off the table for a second, because we know that that's really important for the hybrid work environment. But what are some of the other significant support systems that you believe are critical for the hybrid work environment to work? Go on, Carol Ann. I saw your hand go right up.
No, I was waving goodbye to a colleague. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Well, you're on now.
Oh my gosh. I think it's a little bit of what John is saying, and it's a little bit of what more the investment that we make in making the workplace attractive, making the experience seamless. That doesn't need not necessarily technology, but giving that sense of fun and sociability, the social aspects of it, leaning into those and making the workplace as those qualities as accessible at the workplace as they would be anywhere else. And I think we clearly see that in the younger workforce. Their expectations of workplace are a lot more community oriented than the other side of the demographic currently in the workplace. They have a much higher expectation of maintaining and starting and nurturing social relationships as a part of their work experience. And I think that's there's going to be there will be a return on investment if the workplaces nurture those social connections as diligently, and I think, as to John's word, intentionally, as we think about the hybrid model.
Really interesting. Anybody else want to comment on that? Mark, John?
Well, I definitely think that leadership skills are going to be different, and it will require different training, and may require us looking at who becomes leaders in organizations a little differently than we have in the past. Because how to connect people is becoming so much more important in leadership, as opposed to, you know, maybe technical aptitude in a specific area. Building those social networks is going to return, because it was once a very high priority in leadership roles. And if you go back 25 years, we started culling out middle management. I think the activities that middle management used to play in the world are going to become much more critical as we move to these hybrid environments. And we're going to have to train people how to do that again.
Good point.
I don't think it was something that was well promoted for the last decade and a half in what people do at work.
Well, you're right, John. I think we've been so focused on spans of control around that middle management that I think that's going to reel itself back in. Middle management, that functional, that organizational management is going to be the glue that holds people together, right? They're going to teach those skills that are going to sort of bind a much more dispersed workforce. From a technology standpoint, Karen, I think one of the things that people are going to strive for is they're going to need more info. They're going to need more insights. They're going to need more tools. I affectionately call them concierge services to help them stay connected to people, stay connected to information, and stay connected to resources. Because when you're dispersed, those are the things, those are the binds, the ties that break first. And, you know, think about this. Think about the concept of, John was just talking about, a social network. Coming into the office and, you know, there's some thing that lives in the ether that understands your calendar and your work activities and your network and says, you know, John, I think you ought to sit over on this side of the floor, because there's a bunch of people over there that you don't know, but are doing something loosely connected to you. The interesting thing about loose connections is, you know, those are the relationships that take you to new places. If you sit next to the same person every day, you can finish these other sentences. You sit next to somebody new, there's a chance it's going to take you someplace way different. And I think technology plays a really interesting role in this new work environment to sort of start doing a match.com on that. Start connecting people to the right people, resources, and information.
Really interesting. And on that note, I'm going to get a little tactical, because I have a question that has come in, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what you just said, Mark and team. With the increase in collaboration space, as it was mentioned, versus a focused heads down space, I'm wondering, what percentage are you targeting for collaborative in your workplace now and into the future? And can you project that as best you can? And you might want to talk a little bit more about your fungible concept there, John, and everybody else. Feel free to speak up.
Yeah, so a little hard for me to answer in direct numbers, because if we look at our space, the way we looked at it was about 60% of our office environment space was what we called neighborhood space. So this was owned by a group, but a portion of that was collaborative. So 60% was neighborhood, 30% was community spaces that were truly collaborative. And then 10% were sort of other active spaces. I would think that our neighborhood spaces, the space within them that was collaborative was probably a third. And of that, the third, a lot of it was dual purpose, right? Focused and collaborative. So what we called a focus room was an individual office that could be used for a 4 to 5 person meeting. I believe almost all of those will flip to be physically configured to accommodate the 3 to 4 person in-person meeting and virtual meetings much better. And one person sitting at a computer doing focus work will become sort of a secondary function where it used to be the primary function. So there's this flip within the neighborhood of how things were used. But I think, you know, it's maybe a 10 to 20% shift in movement, and maybe a 10 to 20% add in adaptability. So total, you may get between 20 and 40% shift towards more things that can accommodate collaboration. But that doesn't mean that's their only function. That's why it's hard for me to answer with sort of direct numbers, but that's kind of conceptually where we're headed. And that does depend on the kind of work groups that we're dealing with. You know, whether it's an R&D research function or a corporate services, that may be very different.
Yeah, we're where John is. We're actually beginning to, as we work through our reorganization and our new organization emerges, we're going to try to do some partnering with the businesses on typical team sizes. I think they're going to be different in different parts of the business. And that, I think, is going to shed some light. But I agree, we don't have hard numbers. We won't have hard numbers for a while. But we're going to lean on creating spaces with as few walls as possible, really, to be able to scale, because we think that the ability to scale your teaming sizes without, you know, a full retrofit or something is going to be important, because it's going to vary widely. And so I wish I had the answer to that one, Karen, and don't.
You know, I think it's, every workplace is so unique. I think it's really difficult to say, hey, what's your percentage? You know, I joke when people ask that question, I say, oh, I got a decision management tool I can show you. It's my magic 8 ball. I take it up 60%, right? I mean, who the heck knows? I mean, our businesses are all different. Within our businesses, our offices are different. All I can tell you is it's going up. Whatever it was before, it's going up, right? I mean, that's the only thing that I can literally declare with absolute certainty. I think what we find interesting, and I have the great pleasure of working with our design team as we're thinking about some new offices. I think some of the very specific choices they're making now in things as simple as furniture are really telling. I mean, we have an office that we're redesigning now. We had, you know, the mix previously was 50-50 focus to collaboration. It's now 80-20. And even within that 20, and this is a regional sales office, so very transient, we look at the workstations. The last design meeting we had, we knocked out half the workstations in favor of library tables. Why? They were multifunction, right? Not only could they do focus work, but people could sit down and have a face-to-face meeting on there. A lot more farm harvest tables, right? As opposed to work. It's just the interesting thing of the conscious choices that we're making now, as we know this pendulum swinging, but we don't want to really get ahead of ourselves and knowing that it's very unique to that office.
I think that ease of use that you have all mentioned, and then the technologies around the people, resources, and information are going to help make it more simple, as you said, is quite necessary in this hybrid work environment. We're almost at time, folks, and so I'd like to kind of go around the room, and so you can give us your final thoughts on a hybrid work environment, some of the suggestions for employee engagement that you might have, and anything else that you want to kind of let us know about what you're thinking about. And the one thing that we didn't touch on was portfolios, and possibly the reduction of them or the addition to them, or maybe the altering of where they might be. So I'm going to leave it up to you to kind of just give us a brief couple of minutes on the hybrid work environment and what's keeping you up at night. Mark, you want to start?
Well, I guess my only parting comment is we've never done anything like this before at this speed and urgency. There is no recipe book or cookbook written on how to do this. Anybody that tells you they have the answer doesn't have the answer, right? And we often joke that the workplace is like a fingerprint. It's unique to every one of us. I guess the only thing we can do is learn from each other, and why forums like this are incredibly important in visiting as many people as possible and listening and learning. And we're all in this together as we're trying to sort of reshape what that environment looks like. But as I said, anybody that says, hey, there's a practice there, remember, all the big consultancies are spinning, practices up around this, but it's all around discovery. Nobody knows that there's nothing you can buy. There isn't a SKU for the hybrid workplace. So,
And Mark,
I think the
there's a new
great
question
challenge,
that
great
came in.
opportunity.
There's a new question that just came in that it could be added to what you're saying. I'm wondering if your firm has, the leadership has started to discuss the impact of this on business strategy.
I think I think that's left up to the big consultancies to do that personally. I think we all occupy our own swim lane, and we all try to share and help in our own particular areas. It's the person that integrates this all together. It's the same three legs of the stool: space design, technology, policy, and culture. And that's the recipe for success on all this. It was an agile working, as John taught me years ago, an activity-based working. It's the same recipe now.
Very good, very good.
So,
Carol
Karen,
Ann, do you want? Okay, John, go ahead.
I will say that business strategy is now starting to direct some of this. So with human capital and talent strategies, we are seeing a much higher engagement from those parts of our organization to try and understand how we can weave that together with technology and place strategies. So we are consciously looking at what the future of our workforce demands are going to be, where we would like them to be located, if we care, right? In some talent strategies, we may not care where they're located. There are other talent strategies that may choose to take a follow the sun approach to things to keep work flowing more quickly. So I actually think, and I tell my partners in our organization, that this is the greatest time in the world to be in workplace strategy, because we no longer have to lead the company in a direction. The business is actually coming and driving that direction for us. And COVID has caused, I don't know why, but it did cause that mind flip to occur, which I think gives us the ability to have an impact that is so much broader. I mean, if a diversity talent strategy is part of what you want to do, we now have the opportunity to think about that in a completely different way. And I always said, hiring a diverse talent who's incredibly skilled, you didn't actually impact much because they were going to get a job anyway. But creating jobs in a diverse community, well, that's a whole different story. So my parting thought on all this stuff is nothing that we're doing is highly confidential. Like, we're all workplace strategists. We don't have, IP and intellectual property. I've learned everything that I know from other people. And sharing that information is that's the cornerstone to any of us moving ahead in this world, because you're not going to think of it all yourself.
Really nice, John. Thank you so much. Carol Ann.
What they said. This is such an interesting time to be in workplace, and we are all learning together, and that's almost as exciting as anything I've seen in years. And business strategy and other parts of the company, we are all turning toward one another, recognizing that the future of work, which we will then, as we come to understand what the future of work looks like, and we are challenged to deliver places that enable new ways of working, it's driven a cross-functional charge here that's just really refreshing. Nobody is the silos just kind of went poof, and that's been a gift. And so this is interesting. It's time, and parting information or parting thoughts is reach out to somebody in your company, reach out and just listen to what they're going through and where they think things are headed, because that's where we are truly learning from each other in a rare spirit, and it's fun.
Really nice. Thank you very much, Carol Ann. And I want to thank the entire panel. Jean, I'm turning it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Amazing panel, John, Carol Ann, and Mark. and Karen, our skillful moderator. What an amazing program. Great way to end a Friday. And again, thank you all on behalf of Cornet New England. A reminder also that please fill out the survey that you'll see coming your way. It's really helpful for us to get that input so we can make sure we're delivering the best and the right kinds of workshops and programs for you. So again, happy Friday, and everyone have a great weekend. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.